I did this topic for tonight, Jesus, the cross, and forgiveness, and it is that is kind of what it's about. But as I was going through these scriptures, um, I realized that there is so much that there is so much in these passages that I'm going to take the time because of the cultural things that make a difference in these scriptures. So I'm going to just go ahead and we're going to read the scripture. We're still doing Luke 23 to the end where Jesus dies on the cross. But I've added some others in there so that we can some other scriptures for particular parts. But essentially, okay, remember we're dealing with Jesus as a human being just like us. He was the finest example of humankind. Jesus was the only prophet that actually walked the talk. He continued demonstrating his teachings all the way to and on the cross. And one thing we need to remember is that Jesus, even with his suffering, you know, we focus a lot on his suffering and whatnot, but he was setting an example, not just for his disciples, but for all of God's children, which is us. Okay. Now, an interesting, I just an interesting information here. You see here a picture, all right, of Jesus on the cross. Now, remember, this is, you know, a modern rendition, but notice that he has clothing on. Okay. Now, traditionally, we see Jesus on the cross with the loincloth. All right. And some people, you read all about this, you know, scholars, you know, this is wonderful material for scholars because they can argue back and forth and they all have an opinion. But culturally, you know, culturally speaking, and I have the verse from Matthew here, one of the verses that kind of indicates, all right, and when they had mocked him, they took off the robe from him and put on him his own clothes and took him away to be crucified. Okay, that's one of the passages. Now, the reason for this, but it's like many other things. When when the Greeks got a hold of the Bible, they kind of applied their culture, and we do the same thing. Okay, now seemingly some of the people who were crucified by the Romans, okay, they'll say that they were naked. Okay, and then they say, well, no, then they put the loincloth on them, whatever. But culturally speaking, okay, and I have these two passages to read, so you don't have to just believe me. But in the case of a man who is being crucified publicly, which was Jesus, it is improper to strip him of all his garments. A portion of Jesus' garments were left on him when he was crucified. There were many women and children standing near the cross. The chief priests and elders who were present would have resented the crucifixion of a person without garments. Now, where this goes to culturally too, of course, and you might remember Noah's son. Okay, I'm sorry, his name escapes me, but his sons, Noah was naked in his tent somehow. Okay, you got to remember the story, and his sons actually saw him, and then they whatever. But nudity and nakedness is very, to this day, is very verboten. And the other thing too, when they in the Iraq war, uh, they they used um, they used this nudity when they were torturing uh, prisoners, um, and they because they stripped them and made them naked, and of course that made them talk because it's taboo nakedness. So anyway, I just thought I would bring that up first. Um, and Jesus, of course, um, did have clothes on, but that's not what we see. The other thing I'm going to do tonight is if if you have questions about any of this right now, you can ask. Okay, just unmute and ask. Sometimes I get carried away, and but it's okay. This is informal here, and so it's okay. Okay, now, all right. I'll read this, and then maybe I'll get George to read the next. All right, so this is a continuation from last week. Um, and while they took him away, they laid hold of Shimon, a Cyrenian, who was coming from the village, and they placed the end of the cross on him to carry it with Jesus. And many people followed him, and the women who were mourning and wailing over him. But Jesus turned to them and said, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep over me, but weep over yourselves and over your own children. For behold, the days are coming in which they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never gave birth, and the breast that never gave suck. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things with the green wood, what will be done with dry wood? Now, this can be a little confusing as to what he really means there, but number one, he's talking to the people whilst he has this heavy cross climbing up the hill. All right. When he said, For if they do these things with the green wood, what will be done with dry wood? Okay, this is an Aramaic figurative saying referring to fire and wood. Fire consumes green wood slowly, but dry wood burns quickly. Green wood is symbolic of innocence, and dry wood of guilt. If suffering was inflicted on an innocent man, how much more would be done to the guilty? Jesus was the green wood that the religious authorities were kindling, but the days were to come when the Romans would inflict great suffering on the religious authorities and the people. And once again, yes, this is Jesus' time, but uh, but after Jesus' time, remember the the Romans and the Israelites were still fighting, and they finally the temple was finally destroyed and whatnot. I believe it was 70 A.D. At Masada, and they did suffer, just as this was Jesus being a prophet here. Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and do this. And there were coming with him 2 others, malefactors, to be put to death. And when they came to a place which is called the Skull, they crucified him there, and the malefactors, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "O Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And they divided his garments and cast lots over them. The people stood looking on, and even the leaders of the synagogue mocked him and said, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ, the chosen one of God." And the soldiers ridiculed him as they came near him and offered him vinegar, saying to him, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription in which was written over him in Greek and Roman and Hebrew, "This is the King of the Jews." Okay, now we're going to go through one of these now. I'm leaving the forgive statement to the end because that's what I thought we might could toss around. But so here we go culturally. All right, and they divided his garments and cast lots over them. Now I put the this same incident, so to speak, from John in here. Now, when the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, a part to each of the soldiers. But his robe was without seam, woven from the top throughout. So they said one to another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." And the scripture was fulfilled, which said, "They divided my clothes among them, and for my robe they cast lots." These things the soldiers did. Okay, now I don't have all the references here, but this whole Jesus going to the cross and being crucified has all been predicted. Okay, and I put some of the references in here from the Old Testament, but for this one, they go back to Psalm 22, because Psalm 22 kind of reflects a lot of what went on with Jesus. Okay, for the vicious have surrounded me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. My bones ached with pain. They looked and stared upon me. They parted my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. So that, like I say, I put this in here because you see throughout this, and especially when you read Matthew, and it always says, "And the scripture was fulfilled." So I put this one in here and a couple more, but they all refer back to prophecies from the Old Testament. Okay, and just for fun, I put this in to so that you would know what casting lots was and what the soldiers were doing. So, if several articles are to be disposed of, they are placed in separate piles. Stones of different colors and sizes are then chosen, and each person selects his own stone. These stones are then dropped over the articles by a disinterested person, and each man has to take the article or articles over which his stone falls. In the case there is a single article to be disposed of, like the seamless robe of Jesus, 4 stones are selected, and one of them is thrown upon the article. The person to whom the stone belongs becomes the owner of the article. And so one thing about this is what the Roman soldiers did. It wasn't just Jesus. When at the crucifixions, this is what they what they did as part of their crucifixion ritual. Okay. Now, a little bit about vinegar. And you see here, again, I've got Matthew and I've got Luke and I got John. And I have to remember that each of these people, Matthew, Luke, and John, particularly Matthew and Luke, are part of the synoptic gospels that 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 they all are similar in that, and they're writing about Jesus and what he did and all of that, and that was their purpose. John, the book of John, okay, John was writing to show and to prove to people that Jesus was the Messiah. So you get a little different things here. It's not that different, but sometimes John will be a little different than the others. So I just put this. All right, Matthew 27:37, and they placed above his head in writing the reason for his death. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. There was also, and Luke says, not as much detail, there was also an inscription in which was written over him in Greek and Roman and Hebrew. This is the King of the Jews. And then John says that Pilate also wrote on a stone tablet and placed it on his cross. And the writing was, "This is Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." And a great many Jews read this tablet, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. And it was written in Hebrew and in Greek and in Roman. Dr. Lumsa used Roman, but that is really Latin. And okay, Latin, of course, was used because it was the official language of the Roman Empire. Okay, now, I don't have it on the slide, but if any of you were Catholic or are familiar with the Catholics, and remember, the Catholics have the cross with Jesus on it, and the inscription on the Catholic cross with Jesus on it has the letters I-N-R-I. Now, I can't tell you those letters in Latin, but I wondered for years and years what that was, and nobody, no one really told me, but it was in Latin. Now, at that time, you just don't know really what it was, and I guess technically it doesn't matter, but the thing up here about the reason for his death, and in John, some of the verses afterward, they were arguing, and they wanted Pilate to write on there that that was the reason for his death. Now, what was it, the reason for his death? Maybe, but remember, Jesus did not ever say he was the King of the Jews. The Pharisees and the scribes throughout his mission there just called him the King of the Jews because he was doing things that they believed only God could do. And they were also, well, the king, all right, they were also expecting a physical king to take over in Judea, and of course, that would have been competition for whomever, Pilate or Herod, whatever. So Anyway, so much for the inscription. All right. Okay. And this is another point that scholars belabor about the darkness. And so we just read it from Luke. Now it was about the 6th hour, and darkness fell upon the whole earth and lasted until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the curtains at the door of the temple were torn in the center. Okay, now first of all, the 6th hour was noon. Okay, and I can't explain that timetable, but that's when it was, and the darkness. All right, it's debated. People debate whether, and nobody knows for sure whether the sun, the sun was covered up. People argue it's an eclipse or whatever, and then you'll see in other scriptures that at that time there was an earthquake and whatnot. Another scholarly thing that's been going on for years, but it actually, and this is another one of those that you don't know whether they may have wrote this in there. It may have darkened, it may not, but they say it did, but that's to fulfill a prophecy. And so here's Amos, and this is the prophecy. And it shall come to pass in that day, says the Lord, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the daylight. And I will turn your feasts into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. And I will put sackcloth upon all your loins, and baldness upon every head. And I will make it as the morning for an only son, and the end of it as a bitter day. So, again, all of these episodes with Jesus going to the cross and whatnot are fulfilling prophecies. And as far as the door of the temple, this, according to Dr. Lanza and Dr. Urkel, this is really metaphorical, and it's symbolic of God mourning over Jesus and whatnot. And they say the door of the temple were torn in the center. Was it really? I don't think so. They say that was a metaphor. Okay. So, George, you want to read the scripture?
Sure. We're looking at Luke 23, 32, 24, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, no,
now,
I'm sorry. I didn't change that. It's 39 through 46. Sorry about that.
that's all right. Okay, I got it. No worries. No worries at all. No one. Now, one of the malefactors who were crucified with him blasphemed against him, saying, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and save us also." But the other rebuked him and said to him, "Do you fear even God? For you are also in the same judgment. And ours is just, for we are paid as we deserved and as we have done. But he has done nothing wrong." And he said to Jesus, "Remember me, my Lord, when you come into your kingdom." Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now it was about the 6th hour, and darkness fell upon the whole earth and lasted until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the curtains at the door of the temple were torn in the center. And then Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, "O my Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit." He said this, and it was finished.
Okay. All right. Another scholarly debate that goes on and on. This phrase today, um, today, that word. Well, let's see. Let's read this here. It all has to do with the word today and how it's taken. So, according to Aramaic manner of speech, the emphasis in the text is on the word today. It should read, "Truly I say to you today, comma, you will be with me in paradise." The promise was made on that day, and it was to be fulfilled later. This is characteristic of Semitic speech, implying that the promise was made on a certain day and it would surely be kept. All right, so the thirst and suffering of the penitent thief on the cross were to cease, and his dreams of comfort and bliss would soon be realized when he entered heaven's paradise. This was the assurance that Jesus promised the dying criminal. Now, let's think about this. Since we're going to focus on forgiveness soon, I believe there's a lot of forgiveness here and compassion. The the um, the other guy on the cross was a criminal, okay, and Jesus is just saying, technically, you would say you're forgiven. I know you are, but he said, no, you're going to be in paradise. And so that's one. It's just one of the other Jesus walking the talk, so to speak. And he's on the cross. People have people have mocked him. He's, they beat him. He's got nails in him and whatnot. But he still had the compassion and the forgiveness. Okay, now in keeping with, I said we're going to do the seven sayings. This is the another one of them. Now they were standing by the cross of Jesus, his mother, and his mother's sister, and Mary of Cleopas and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that very hour, the disciple took her with him. Okay, the significance of this is that, first of all, the disciple whom he loved is said to be John, who is the author of this book of the Bible. And John was, I don't know that you want to say he was a favorite, because Jesus did not have favorites. But he was the youngest, and he was the only disciple that came to the cross. The rest of them were long gone. Okay. And so Jesus just said, his woman was there, his mother was there, but notice none of his brothers were there. And only his mother. And so he said to John, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to John, the disciple, "Behold your mother." And he was merely having John to take care of his mother. Now, you'll remember that Jesus' brothers now, not there was one brother, they say his name was James, that kind of followed Jesus. The rest of them, and at some point at first, even his mother thought he was crazy. What he was preaching was crazy. So at this point, mother hung in with Jesus, but it would have been questionable whether the brothers would have um, taken care of the mother the way they should have been. So that's another one of the sayings, behold your mother, behold your son. Okay. And okay, I just put these two in here. Let me check something first. Yeah, okay. Oh, I did, okay. I did the vinegar, right? Did I talk about the vinegar?
No.
No, you didn't.
Okay. I don't know how I missed that. All right, we're going to go back and do that first. Okay, so they all reference the fact that they gave Jesus vinegar. All right. But what it really was, was wine mixed with myrrh. Okay, now myrrh is an herb. We use it today in herbal medicine too. Was given to Jesus in a sponge fastened on the end of a reed rather than in a cup because the cross was so high. Now, Jesus had asked for water. Essentially, he was thirsty. All right. They did not give him water. Okay. In these lands, government officials and jailers have no sympathy for prisoners who have been convicted. Jesus was thirsty. He had been punished severely and had lost much blood. He needed water to quench his thirst, so he asked for some. Instead of him giving him water, the soldiers gave him vinegar. And when he tasted it, now catch this right here. When he tasted it, he refused to drink it. Then he cried in a low tone, "It is fulfilled." Okay, now that's one. All right. And then vinegar mixed with gall was given to criminals so that their suffering would be less intense while they were on the cross. It acted as a narcotic and helped deaden awareness. In this case, Jesus tasted it but refused to drink it. He was thirsty for water. Okay, now let's go to, I missed that one. Okay, now let's go back to, okay. Luke, oh my Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. But John, this is just a difference here. John says that Jesus drank the vinegar. When Jesus drank the vinegar, he said, "It is fulfilled." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now, I don't really have too much about this because it's pretty straightforward in my mind that that when you die, your spirit goes to God and your body, whatever, goes in the ground or is cremated or whatever. Okay, and my only comment here is that notice it says he gave up his spirit, okay, not his body. All right, because that comes, the idea of the body, the resurrection is something else. I'm going to mute him. Is well, that's another situation with the resurrection. But into the hands I commit my spirit. Father said, gave up his spirit. Okay, now we're going to go back to forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, that particular phrase, what Jesus was talking about, and once again, remember, he was, these people had done horrible things to him. All right, and some say he was talking just about the Roman soldiers, but others say he was talking about everyone who had a part in his crucifixion, and so in the condition that he was in, whatever, he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And and what he meant, okay, the Roman soldiers were doing their jobs. Okay, and that's what we have a lot today of. The Roman soldiers were doing their jobs, and they were having fun casting lots with the clothes, because that's what they did. They had no understanding of what Jesus' message was, of what his mission was, and there's no brotherly love, no love one another, because it's a job, and it has to be the same way today with the people who are responsible for the the electric chair, or whatever means that they have for capital punishment. Got to be the same way. And so anyway, but for him to forgive them, well, that's another thing. So what I wanted to do with this forgiveness, all right, I went and got a simple definition, okay? And to forgive is to cease to feel resentment, anger, hate against an offender. And also can be a decision to not hold something against another person, despite what he or she has done to you. All right. Now, forgive and forget. And we're going to kick this around a little bit. I hope I can have your participation. But forgive and forget is to completely stop blaming or being angry with someone for something they have done, and to stop thinking about it. Okay, I just wanted y'all to think about this, and we are going to talk about it some. And let me just catch this next. Oh, okay. And we go to 23:34, and that's the sign. And Jesus said, "Oh, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." Now, okay, I wanted before we really kick it around, I went back to Matthew 6, which this is the Lord's Prayer, okay? And so, and forgive us our offenses as we have forgiven our offenders. All right, and do not let us enter in temptation, but deliver us from evil. Okay, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Now, these next two lines have always been confusing. They're explained. They're explained in many different crazy ways. But for if you forgive men their faults, your Father in heaven will also forgive you. And this verse 15, But if you do not forgive men, neither will your Father forgive even your faults. Okay, so before we start talking about that, it's like, okay, if you, and we go back to the definition of that you have resentment and hate in your heart, okay, and you get rid of that, that's to forgive. Well, so if you get rid of the resentment, the hate, da 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 da, then God will also forgive you. Now, and I have a different. It's like, so how does God forgive? Based on the fact that God is love and God is spirit. Okay, God forgives through love, and love will enter you, and you will be forgiven if you have released all that hate and resentment. But if you haven't, see this it says, oh, your Father will never forgive you. It's just too strong here, and the understanding is not there. But if you think about this, if you do not forgive, okay, you are full of hate, resentment, and whatnot. So where is the room for that love and forgiveness for God to have for you? And so I just wanted to go over that again. And the other thing is, forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't really have anything to do with the other person or the other. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with us, because if you think about it, and you are holding that anger, that hate, that resentment, it's hurting you. And when you release it, it well, your health will greatly improve if you're doing that. So okay, so I'm just gonna put these out here, and I'm gonna turn the slides off and just see what you guys think. I I personally have an example, and I will do that, but let me okay. Okay. Thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions. I really appreciate